one of the things I've always thought about Hitler is that, you know, people, you have to admire Hitler. That's the thing, because he was an organizational genius.
Jordan Peterson, what can I say about that man? Well, more than I have words to express. But he never disappoints, especially on Twitter, where he posts wild and insane things daily. Now, some of you might think that I'm obsessed with Peterson, but hear me out. I'm not. Okay, maybe just a little. Well, the truth is, it's not so much an obsession as much as it's the fact that I'm allergic to nonsense, especially when that nonsense is being spewed by someone that a lot of people take seriously. Jordan Peterson quote tweeted a tweet from James Lindsay with the following response and a picture. No, the communists were worse. And that's a hard contest to win. Peterson wrote in his characteristic emphatic manner with words broken into sections on different lines as though it was poetry. Now, some of you would see this and say, hey, what's bad about what Peterson said? He never said he preferred Nazis. Now, if you mean to make that sort of comment on this video, seriously, this is YouTube. Get off it and touch grass. Now, back to the tweet which blew up all over Twitter, with some people being critical of Peterson while others defending him. In a way, I think Peterson does these things on purpose to generate traffic and engagement and ultimately money. He has said so himself. Just take a listen.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to, because it's just so goddamn funny. I can't help but say it. I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
That is what it is.
I know, it's so funny.
He's found a way to monetize social justice warriors by becoming an anti-social justice warrior with all the characteristics of social justice warriors, but with different talking points. The clownish dressing, the apocalyptic language.
And are we degenerate in a profoundly threatening manner? I think the answer to that may well be yes. The idea that we are ensconced in a culture war has become a rhetorical commonplace. How serious is that war? Is it serious enough to increase the probability that Russia, say, will be motivated to invade and potentially incapacitate Ukraine merely to keep the pathological West out of that country, which is a key part of the historically Russian sphere of influence?
The victim peddling, the lack of self-reflection.
There's part of me that's thinking, well, look, Peterson, the College of Psychologists is after you. You've taken it to court. Now the judges have decided that you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. And I think, well, I expressed political sentiment and I'm actually informed. For the life of me, I can't see how I'm wrong.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
All things you would typically associate with social justice warriors are embodied by Peterson on Twitter. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, you lose the right to say anything critical about this video. Looking at the tweet on the surface level, it seems obvious that Peterson is right. After all, communist regimes combined killed more people than the Nazi regime. I could go on a comparison to show why this might not actually be true, but that would be just as moot a point as Jordan Peterson saying the communists were worse than the Nazis. The problem with this tweet is that there is no point in making such comparisons. It's like saying which is worse between a mass murderer and another mass murderer. Well, after a few thousand people killed by these regimes, the distinction becomes one without a difference, not to speak of the fact that these regimes were responsible for the deaths of millions of people. What's the difference between Hitler killing 6 million Jews and Stalin killing 9 million people in the Soviet Union? Are the 3 million differences in death any indication that Stalin was worse and by extension Hitler better? Who makes these kinds of comparisons? There were a couple of interesting responses on Twitter. Wilfred Riley asked, is this supposed to be bad? Both were horrible, but the Reds had an even higher body count. Now, I've already explained why such distinctions make no difference, so I won't bother with it again. But what I'll say is this. What is it with people on Twitter and their obsession with body count? Just before this silliness, there was a huge row on Twitter on how women with high body counts were sluts and useless and not deserving of a man's love. Interesting enough, they never say the same things about men with a high body count, which goes to show that this is not about how high a person's body count is, as much as it is about shaming women. And in this case that we're currently talking about, it's about painting communists as uniquely evil and bad. There is no doubt that the communists were bad. But I'm not going to make the argument that they were any worse than the Nazis. The whole point of Peterson's tweet is to reinforce his idea that communism is an existential evil that must never be allowed. He does this by pointing to the number of deaths under communist regimes as examples of such evil. And this is done in juxtaposition to capitalism, hailed as this wonderful economic and political system. Overall, I think communism is much worse than capitalism, but not because it has killed more people than capitalism, because capitalism has killed just as much, if not even more people than communism. The difference, in my opinion, is that communism is a much less efficient system for producing wealth, and the idea of private ownership of the means of production in capitalism appeals to me. But that's about it. Aside that, capitalism is not in a better moral position than communism, especially when it comes to killing people. While the historical evils of communism seems to be obvious to Peterson, he chose to ignore evil, destruction, oppression, and deaths that happened under capitalist regimes, mostly driven by economic incentives such as the horrors of imperialist Japan in the 20th century, the transatlantic slave trade, slavery in the US war in Iraq that killed millions of Iraqis for economic interests, capitalist exploitation of child labor and mineral resources in third world countries.
In the mining town of Kolwezi, the desperate and poor are looking for cobalt. It's a vital component in batteries used in goods ranging from electric cars to phones and laptops. More than half of the world's cobalt is produced in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tens of thousands of children are estimated to be used to dig for the toxic metal without protective clothing.
Or the existence of sweatshops in Asia, where workers work under such horrid conditions that suicide is commonplace. All this just so Westerners can enjoy their luxury goods at affordable prices. And just because these terrible things are not happening within Western countries themselves, does not mean that they are not products of capitalism or that capitalism doesn't benefit from these horrors. Peterson chose to ignore these obvious historical and present flaws of capitalism, but would proclaim at the top of his voice that communism is uniquely evil. I hold no brief for either system. I only ask for consistency and fairness in logic and in judgment. Back to the Twitter interactions, I pointed out that this was basically Peterson saying that the Nazis were better in some sense. And the response I got from someone was this: the Nazi body count is much less than the communist body count. Do the math, Charles. You said Nazis are better. Nobody else used the term. To which I replied, gee, when someone uses the word worse to compare two things, it's because both things are the same. If A is worse than B, then B is dash than A. Fill in the blank space. Try using logic and common sense. And then I forgot to add, not everything is a math problem. Sometimes it's a comprehension problem. The whole exercise seems silly to me, but this is the sort of conversation Twitter has devolved into since Elon Musk took over. People posting weird things for engagement, and such things doesn't seem to be beneath Peterson. Finally, one sensible tweeter said, amongst other things, I really don't get why the man Peterson tried to make the distinction, but I do know why. It's Jordan Peterson, and sometimes it's not very bright, especially on Twitter. And that's why it never occurred to him in the first place how much of a bad take such a comparison was. Now, if you're looking for something fun and exciting to read, check out my crime fiction novel, which features a debate on race and colonialism. Grab a copy and enjoy the read. The link is in the description of the video. So that's the video. If you like what we do on this channel, consider becoming a channel member or patron. However, your likes, shares, and views are just as valued.